Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new TEAM therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David.
Hello, Philip.
How are you doing, Dr. Burns?
Good. We're glad to have you today. Rhonda will get us started.
Well, I want to welcome all of our listeners to episode 231. And we have as I say about all of our guests, we have an exciting guest, Phillip Lolonis. He's a licensed clinical social worker and a level 3 team therapist. And Phillip conducts nature therapy while using TEAM-CBT methods and techniques and structure. And he also said that he does forest bathing, immersing his clients in nature to facilitate soothing their nerves. I actually did that on Rosh Hashanah with my son and his friends. So I think that's really fun. But first, before we start with our fun interview with Phillip, I want to make one announcement and read 2 really cool endorsements. And so here is a really neat announcement that David and I are excited to announce that Brandon Vance, who is a level 4 team therapist, will be leading a Feeling Great book club for anyone in the world reading Dr. Burns' book, Feeling Great. This is not a treatment group, and it's not oriented toward therapists. Rather, it will be a support for anyone in learning the information in David's book, Feeling Great, to discuss the content and to ask questions. The details are being finalized, but there will probably be 2 groups on Wednesdays starting March 17th. One group will start at 9 a.m. Pacific time, which will allow people in the UK to join at 5 p.m. and people in India to join at 10:30 p.m. There'll be a second group that will start at 5 p.m. Pacific time, which will be noon Thursday in Australia and 2:00 p.m. Thursday in New Zealand. The groups will run for 17 weeks and will cost only $8 per session, although no one will be turned away for lack of funds. Please contact Brandon Vance at brandonvance@gmail.com. That's BRANDONVANCE@gmail.com for details and to register. If you don't yet have the book, this is yet another reason to go ahead and enjoy buy a copy and enjoy reading and learning from it.
What book are you referring to?
Feeling Great.
Oh,
yeah, it's
cool.
The Feeling Great book club for people wanting to read Feeling Great and who have questions and want to talk about it.
Let me add, there is a Feeling Great book club for mental health professionals. It's been meeting for about 6 weeks, again, a chapter a week in New York, and that's been a huge success. I dropped in and did an hour-and-a-half Q&A for them about a week ago. It was tremendous fun. I love the fact that Brandon is doing this for the general public, and because I've been wanting to do more training things for the general public, and Brandon has taken a huge plunge in this direction. For those of you who don't know, Brandon is a psychiatrist, but a gifted team therapist, and was one of my top editors and helpers when I was writing Feeling Great. He patiently went through it several times and made tons of helpful comments. And so if you'd like to kind of hang out with other people and learn together, I think this is a fantastic thing, and if it's successful, and I'm sure it will be, it could lead to all kinds of additional good things for the general public. At some point, we might be able to merge it with the new app. I've been working like 12 hours a day sometimes on the new Feeling Great app, and I even had the thought that maybe people in the book club could be, when we're ready, could be using this Feeling Great app And vice versa, people using the Feeling Great app could be maybe also, if you want, joining one of these book clubs, and a chance to learn and practice, and all kinds of good things could emerge. So thank you, a million thanks to dear friend and brilliant and delightful colleague, Dr. Brandon Vance.
Yeah, and it's cool. It's so cool that he's setting up 2 groups so that people all over the world could find a group. Of the time that meets their needs.
Yeah, and the question is, what are you going to do with your life when you're alive? And
exactly.
Brandon is pouring tremendous life energy into something he believes in, and it just gotta end up as a totally awesome thing for everyone.
Yeah. So I'd love to read these 2 emails from Valentina. She was our guest on episode 226 on the Great Death in a Corporate Institutional Setting that we posted on January 25th. And just as a follow-up, she emailed you and said, overall...
Let's just say roughly what happened to her.
Okay.
She had sent out an email. She had this, she's in a big, we've disguised it, but a important institution in this part of the country. And she'd had a huge promotion, and then she sent out an impassioned email supporting some of the people in the company who were protesting, and with good reason. And then she got slammed by the people, her superiors. And so she came to us and poured her heart out and let us publish that as a podcast. How do you respond to criticism in a public corporate setting? We've talked about the 5 secrets, but this was a very specific application of it. So what happened to our friend who we're calling Valentina?
Okay, well, here's her first email to you. Hi, David. Overall, your 5 secrets were spot on. My colleagues said they were particularly impressed with my email that included all the things we had discussed on the podcast. And they were committed to my success as they saw real potential based on how I handled things. At a later meeting, some people brought up the letter again, and I spoke up about how, in an attempt to show solidarity with our trainees, I failed to show my appreciation for their Herculean efforts and success. A few people came to my defense. There is something wonderful about sharing vulnerability. The 5 secrets are like Jedi mind tricks.
It's so cool. Yeah. And she is such a neat person, and also has said, raised the question to me, why doesn't vulnerability work in dating situations or personal relationships, love relationships? And I said, that would be another podcast if you want to come back on. So I'd love to do that one too, because that's dating is a whole other kettle of fish. And there's a lot to learn in that arena as well.
Yep. Okay, cool. I said I was going to read 2, but she sent a second one. But I think that's good enough in terms of timing. So that we can now jump in with Phillip Lolonis and hear about his nature therapy with TEAM. Phillip. Hi.
Hi. It's just what an honor to be on with both of you, and it's kind of semi-making up for our Sunday hikes that I get to see both of you and kind of carpool with Rhonda and see David, and definitely honed some of my skills in nature from those Sunday hikes, which is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. It's so great to see you. It's always great to see you. You're such a warm and fun person, and you're so thoughtful. Every now and then you send me a photo from one of your hikes, and it just means a lot to me.
Well, Phillip, can you
that's beautiful.
Explain what you do? Like, explain what nature therapy, what using...
Yeah, what is nature therapy? It's funny because I just kind of Googled it just to check out what's out there, because I kind of just said it myself. It's just kind of how I see it. But there's some specific words out there that I'm seeing, like horticulture therapist and things like that. And then I think about it, and I have a viticulture degree from UC Davis, which is the study of vineyards. And we can get into that. But mostly nature is, and I know David talks a lot about the Buddha, but the Buddha was awakened in nature, under the Bodhi tree. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for especially now during what's happening with COVID and just social distancing and the fear and seeing other people and just people hiding and avoiding because of for good reason, that nature therapy with social distancing, and we wear masks, and I'm lucky I've got my first shot in, so it makes me feel better, and I get that test consistently because I want to make sure my clients are safe. But I was doing nature therapy before COVID, but it just became so needed, and so I'm pretty grateful to be able to do this and actually not have my office is nature, or of course it's Zoom as well. So I'd say that this all started because I grew up on partly my father was a farmer. And so I'm the first generation not a farmer. And we're talking hundreds of years in Greece. And my grandfather came over from here in 1915 and planted in 20 with a farm. And my dad was one of 10. And I grew up as a child watching him on the tractor and just being out in nature and not even realizing that this was normal for me, and that how much peace and connection I had with that. And when I don't have it, I can definitely tell the difference. And so I like to use that with TEAM. And out here, it's Mount Diablo. That's about 3,900, 3,840, something like feet. And on the foothills is where I take people that are interested in this. And we can be under a 200 or 400 year old oak tree with a picnic bench, and we're doing TEAM. And then we can also do the walks, kind of like we do on Sunday, where there's many people that like to do the movement, and it helps them, especially kids. Working with the youngest, I'm very surprised, but 7 years old, and working with the families. I love working with families. So it's a great place to versus say the office, where many of my clients have worked with me in the office have said, wow, the therapy of nature just moves faster. I can collect myself quicker, and I feel more at ease. And so that's something that you just can't do in an office.
When you talk about it, what I'm curious about is how you use the forms. Like, are you still testing them with the brief mood survey? And what happens if you want to pull up the daily mood log or like a relationship journal?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got a backpack and I pull it out. I have all of the necessaries in there. And so every client's different. Sometimes they want to send it to me ahead of time in the morning, the brief mood survey. And then sometimes they'll do it with pen on the picnic bench, filling it out in nature, and the same thing when they finish. So we're still testing. Absolutely. We're following the full TEAM methods. And there's different things that happen during that too.
I love hearing that. And that's very similar, as you know so well, having been on many Sunday hikes, where we also work with therapists, and the group can come. They're free of charge. We're not doing them now due to COVID, sadly, but I did them, and we'll start them again as soon as I can. But we did the hikes for at least 10 years, and people would show up at my front door at 9 a.m. or 8:30 in the summertime when it's hotter. And then we go out hiking for 3 to 4 hours on the trails near my house. We do therapy while hiking, and also teaching therapy and practicing techniques. But I'll go through like a daily mood log verbally, but picturing it in my mind. And at the start of each session, I'll say, they'll say what the problem is, and I'll say, now, how down or depressed or unhappy are you feeling between 0 and 100? And then they might say, 80. And then, because I can remember all the categories, and then how anxious are you? How panicky, worried, nervous? They say, 100%, and, go through all the 9 categories of emotions. And then, as you say, Philip, just go through the TEAM model, TEAM, you can empathize while walking and wait and get a grade from them in empathy, and see if you get an A in empathy. Do they give you an A? And then go on to assessment of resistance and using a variety of methods. And those were some of the most fantastic experiences of my life, those Sunday hikes, for a variety of reasons. But not only is it just stunningly beautiful out on these trails, and when I would see the photos, I couldn't believe that that's where we were. It was so beautiful. And your photos are the same. They're so unbelievably beautiful. But also the connection that you feel with other people when they're being vulnerable and open, is pretty jaw-dropping. It's pretty refreshing.
It is. It provides a place of just a little more at ease. Like I was with a patient today, a client, for a good 90 to 2 hours. And you could just, the breaks would be the red-tailed hawk would show up. I mean, I can't tell you, everything shows up there. We get, some people scare people. It's like, I feel, I'm kind of like, wish I had someone that had a snake phobia, because during the summer we get rattlesnakes, we get everything. And I grew up with them, so I'm not afraid at all. And I never had one. So I'm hoping someone will come in with a snake phobia and we can do that. But nature's out there to calm and connect. And it's just, people don't even know what's happening. And then you can see that their body language is there. And I use mindfulness of nature, using sounds, and to ground people that, like PTSD. That's the patient I had today. And she's already told me that, versus being in an office and here, things have moved so much faster in terms of therapy and her connecting with her body and being able to talk back to the resistance and know how she feels, versus in the office would disassociate more often. So that's already there, like how much better it is for my patients.
So you feel greater peace, and they feel greater peace, and that facilitates the therapeutic process, because a part of depression and anxiety is sometimes the intense agitation people feel. I've been with people who were in what I would call a blizzard of depression or a blizzard of anxiety. They're just beside themselves with agony, and that, of course, activates negative thoughts and negative feelings and confuses the person. And the peace that you describe allows people to get a perspective and see how mean-spirited and distorted a lot of these negative thoughts and feelings can be. Do you have them record the sessions and then listen to the recordings afterwards? Record them on a cell phone or something?
Yes, especially, well, I ask them permission, but especially the ones that when we're doing the hikes, a lot of times we'll hike and I become the voice of resistance or externalization of voices or feared fantasy, or we practice. I have a lot of corporate clients, and we like to practice for their project management teams, the 5 secrets, of course. And so we're doing that, and then I can become hostile, like coworker or a husband or wife or partner or whatever. And they have to talk back. And meanwhile, we're kind of moving at the same time, kind of like what we do on those Sunday hikes. And I'd say the first, you're talking about people with agitation. So I first started this experiment, I guess it was about maybe 10 years at Eden Outpatient, which is for adult severe mental illness. So they're pretty much having schizophrenia and a lot of intrusive voices, paranoia. And I would run a group, and it was right around 23 to 28 people. And this was indoors, but then we were up against the hills in San Leandro, and we'd go, and this was at the Fairmont Hospital campus area. So if people know the area, they might in Northern California, but regardless, it's gorgeous.
Is that the Fairmont Hospital in the East Bay?
Correct.
The one that's near the bay?
Absolutely, yes. And so
because I started my internship there.
Oh, wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was my first assignment as an intern at Island Hospital. I had a ward of dying patients, 30 patients.
Oh, wow.
And it's quite a memory for me, Fairmont Hospital. It's very fond memories of that place.
Yeah, me too, because I would at Eden, and then I'd also work at the Willow Rock, which is the adolescent psych unit. But this was, I'm going to talk about Eden, which was outpatient. So I convinced the higher ups that, hey, let me take them on this hike. So what we do is we would hike up the foothill in San Leandro, and there are various ages in the 20s, all the way to 67 was our oldest patient. And we get up on the hills, and then they'd overlook all of San Francisco, Oakland, Silicon. It's just so beautiful, and you'd see the bay, and you could already see the difference. And then
you could already see the difference in what?
In their demeanor and how they would talk, and just how it would get almost silent. And they would you could see that it appeared that, and they would tell me that the internal stimuli was much less. It's like a volume on the radio, much less, because it's just. And the interesting part is, if you go back in time, because my thesis was on schizophrenia, that Socrates called what we call schizophrenia today, or madness, he called it the holy disease. And they would take people and they would bring them to waterfalls in nature, and that's where they would do the healing. And both of you know what we do with people with schizophrenia now in our country, where are they treated mostly?
Just with pretty serious meds. Oh, jail.
Jail. They're treated in jails. So how do you put someone with this intensity, internal stimuli, paranoia, et cetera, and fear, just tremendous fear and agitation, and you put them in a cell? Is that really going to be helpful when it turns out, like, from Epictetus, CBT, all these things, they were started a long time ago. And what are we doing? We're doing the opposite. So I'm trying to bring that nature, but regardless, going back to those people. So I had a psychiatrist come up there with us, and you know who that is? That psychiatrist?
No, who?
Do you remember in our group? She's going to be mad at me because I haven't seen her in a while. It's not coming up to me.
Heather?
She was in our group.
Heather Clegg?
Say again.
Heather?
No, it wasn't Heather. No, it wasn't Heather. She was.
You meant Nia.
Oh my God. Yes. Oh my God, Nia. My apologies. She listens to this. She's like, oh my God, how do you forget my name? But I haven't seen Dr. Lozano in a while. But anyway, she would come up with us, and she saw how good it was and those were her patients. So her and I would work together, and it was just beautiful. And you could see that it was a lot more ease, and they could talk so much easier than in the office, and they would say things, and then you could get a lot of clinical connection and understanding and how to help them. And she could, medication wise, have a lot more, I suppose, information to help her dial in the best type of medication management for them.
Well, Phillip, you're talking so beautifully about how being in nature is really helpful for people with schizophrenia. But I imagine most of your patients right now don't have schizophrenia. And
no, I'm laughing. No, yeah. They do not.
I know, I'm trying to be subtle. How is nature helping your clients? Like, are they also able to talk with more ease? And you had mentioned somebody with PTSD or trauma.
Yes, I'd say that's primary. Those are the ones that really, it does a lot. But I'll have a client with eating disorder come in, and it's like that tenseness and the tightness, and the body starts to relax, and it becomes a little bit easier. And like 7-year-old, I start at 10 years old, but a little whippersnapper, 7-year-old is super smart. And she comes in, and you can get her walking and talking. And I have a Labrador that's a therapy pet that's super well trained, hand signals, things like that. And so it gets the 7-year-old to start to do these things. She gets at ease. The next thing, we're hiking up and leaving mom and dad behind in the little picnic area. And then we go up, and then she starts to, express herself and more honestly and open of why she's angry or why she's depressed or her fears. And so it becomes something where it only took 4 or 5 sessions, and we were pretty much done. And then having mom and dad learn the 5 secrets at the same time, families can then become their own therapists. It's pretty cool.
Mm.
And that's just not going to work in a small place with a young child. It's a lot harder in an office.
Yeah, it's like thinking outside of the box. People get so rigid in the way we do things, the way we think about things. So we have this very formal way of relating to patients in the box, in the office, following these rules. And like the ones I had when I was a resident, I wasn't allowed to use English when I spoke with my patients. I had to just be silence or mutter a couple words at most. And it was so abnormal. And yet it was thought this is the correct way to treat people. Don't ever show them how you feel, or don't ever talk to them, or it was just kooky. And now I do therapy in all kinds of settings. I don't even think of it as therapy. A lot of the early healers, depending on your religious orientation, but Jesus, if you're Christian, he wasn't preaching sermons. He was just doing carpentry and, everyday shit and interacting with people. And he was on a mountain and gave a little talk to people, and they call it the Sermon on the Mount. But just healing people on the road as you're walking and as you're traveling. And what you're talking about more is the idea of the therapist as a healer. And using all of the resources of life and the world around us to try to bring greater peace and happiness to people, and then combine it with a powerful technology like TEAM, and it's a pretty awesome package. Because even on the Sunday hikes, I can just think back on them. And in addition, to me, when I work with a client, a patient, whatever word you want to use, it's like an adventure. I always used to say the Sunday hikes were inner hikes. The adventure was an inner adventure. Mm-hmm. But then on the outside, we see a lake and we see beautiful ducks and just all these beautiful things. Do you ever see any tarantulas on your hikes? In this?
It's funny you say that, David, because Mount Diablo is like super well known for tarantulas.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
So it's a certain time of the year.
Yeah.
They're out walking. They're just looking for a mate. All the males are out there. And then you mentioned rattlesnakes. On our Sunday hikes, we found we didn't find it, but we noticed it about 2 yards off the path up on the Roos Ridge, a rattlesnake home. And for 2 years it was there, and it was always filled with 8-10 snakes in there. It was so cool walking past that. And the turkeys. Lately, there have been so many turkeys. I love seeing turkeys. We've had as many as 40 turkeys on our lawn every now and then recently, and for years we never saw a turkey.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll be on the path with a client and we'll stop, and it depends on the time of day and we'll just get silent, and and that's sometimes a good break for some people, because if we're doing exposures and things like that, the deer or the hawk or like you said, the turkeys, a little bit of everything shows up, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And some of my clients are good with the rain, that will go in, and it's up to them. We'll have umbrellas. So I quite like that. Like, we were a little muddy today because it rained quite a bit over the last 4, 5, 6 days. So there was a fair amount of mud and water, and it's just like, your body has to move in a certain way to navigate, and then you get out of your mind. And when you can get out of your mind and you're into the body, all of a sudden there's a little more openness, and then that's when TEAM can really just start to retrain the brain. And it's just a beautiful, like you said, David, that putting these together is just an awesome piece. I feel grateful to have both.
That's neat. Do you do 100% nature therapy? Do you ever meet with clients in an office?
Well, I used to. So I used to work at the East Bay Center for Anxiety with Elizabeth Dandinell, who's wonderful.
Oh, that's right.
Taught me a bunch. Yeah. And so when I left there, I grew up in Walnut Creek, so it's like perfect and set up for it. And then with COVID, there's no point in having an office, but I do Zoom for sure from different parts of California, which is nice. And then it's up to the people what they want. I don't tell them, you have to do nature therapy. Of course not. They can do whatever they want to do. But I find that like one family I worked with 2 kids, that it just made it easier. And sometimes I would see them separately too. And then I'd bring them all together, and we'd be there at a picnic table. And then I would have taught the parents prior the 5 secrets. And then these are teenage kids a lot of times. They would be able to connect with their kids a lot easier. And my dog's there, and there's nature. And versus the office, I tell you that the success or the outcome is so much better when that's there. But I would say only about 30 to 40 right now during COVID, 30 to 35% of my clients are doing nature therapy. But some will drive from San Francisco because they know that it's just very helpful.
Yeah, that's great.
Especially for the kids.
Yeah, it sounds so terrific. It's so appealing. We'll put your contact information in the show notes for sure, but everybody doesn't necessarily read the show notes. And so if somebody would be interested in this nature therapy that you're doing, how might they contact you?
Well, I would say just Google my name, and then there's several ways, including like through the websites. I'm part of the Feeling Great Therapy Center with Rhonda and a few other colleagues. And I'm going to start I know I already have one person interested in training people to be able to do that, because ultimately that's what I'd like to do is have people be able to do this anywhere in the world and come in and train and learn how to do this with team. And I do a lot of mindfulness as well. Mindfulness.
Well, we love you in spite of that, Philip.
Oh, I know you do.
Listen, let me back up a second. You're going too fast. They said they should Google your name, but they won't even remember your name, much how to spell it. So it's Phillip, Phillip, Lolonis, Lolo, that's Lolo, Nis, Nis, Phillip Lolonis. So Google that.
That would be it.
And then is that Feeling Great Therapy Center you're mentioning, and who is that you work with there? I think
the woman who started this, she's really wonderful. It's Dr. Borofsky. Dr. Borofsky, I think is her name.
So you guys are working together in Rhonda's new Feeling Great Therapy Center. So both are to be highly recommended.
Absolutely, you can get me through that as well. And that's something that I've wanted to do is train people to do this, just because I see as nature. Back in the 20s, it was a Quaker psychiatrist, Dr. Kirkbride, and Dorothea Dix had those asylums, which now we see as bad, but they used to bring people in and they would dress up and they could go into nature, and they were gorgeous areas that really allowed people to be at peace, and they could come and go as they wanted. And things have changed so much. And now with COVID, you see so many, I've already seen 3 or 4 kids commit suicide here in the East Bay, like within the last month. And they don't.
Phillip, you're not talking about your client. Wait, Phillip, you're not talking about your client.
No, I'm not. No,
because that wouldn't be the best advertisement.
I know.
I don't do that. But it's actually very serious, because what's happening is, yes, because I've worked in 3 or 4 elementary schools, and I really, really enjoyed that. And all they really need to be is learn thoughts, emotions, behaviors, communication. We need to be teaching that like we do math and English and science. Yeah. So here's these kids in the United, especially in the Western world, and now all of a sudden they're in their rooms alone. They don't have interaction, and they don't understand their thoughts or emotions. And then a lot of bad things are happening right now. And the pressure of parents, they're under tremendous pressure to get the kids back in school. And there's tremendous stress. And so by going in nature and then learning about thoughts, feelings, emotions, and communication with the 5 secrets, these kids are starting to can heal, but there's not enough, this happening in terms of in elementary school and being taught in our country. So it makes me feel really sad, but I'm also kind of excited that maybe that's what we're going to learn now, is to do a little more of that in schools when the kids are allowed back in. But right now, a lot of the kids don't want to do Zoom. So they're like, the parents are calling me and saying, hey, can the nature therapy, and they're coming. So I feel pretty good about that. I just wish there was more people I could train quickly, because we need it right now with COVID.
Another thing,
isolation.
Yeah, what you're doing is so awesome. Another thing I found on the Sunday hikes was I can use the environment in all kinds of ways to facilitate rapid healing. And we've talked about this on previous podcasts, and you've probably seen it too, Phillip. But if I have someone who's shy, one of the techniques that can be helpful is for them to approach a stranger and say, listen, I've been shy and I'm ashamed of it all my life. I've been shy. I've been hiding it, and I've decided to stop hiding it and stop being ashamed and start telling people. And that's why I'm telling you. well, this is a great technique, and it usually gets wonderful responses from other people, but shy people will virtually never follow through on the advice to do that. So when I'm on hikes, I can force it to happen. And
oh yeah,
go ahead.
No, and I've been there. I've watched you do it, and that's exactly where I take it from. Is you modeling what you're doing, and even now with hikes, because also people are so desperate now. We're wearing masks and we're hiking, and we're on these trails that people do want to talk because they're dying to connect with another human being. And the shy person, or we'll do feared fantasy, or we'll do survey technique, will actually work now. I think in the beginning of COVID, it didn't work. I kind of stayed away from it because people were so terrified. And now people are starting to relax a little more and realizing outdoors, social distancing with a mask, you're going to be safe. So now you can see I can start to do more of these exposures and self-disclosure, exactly what you're talking about, David.
Yeah. Can you just explain it? Because people won't know what these words mean. You and I know, and Rhonda knows. But what do you mean by exposure and self-disclosure and feared fantasy? Just any one of those, just to bring it to life, like what might happen on a hike.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so these are exposures, a way of facing fears that like you talked about, the shyness. And being out in nature, I find that people are willing to take a little more risk. They're willing to face a fear a little bit more than, say, what I used to do in the town of Walnut Creek or, say, Alameda. And you'd walk up to people and, let's just say, the survey technique. And someone's having a thought, say, I'm always not good at this. Or maybe, David, you could give me one that it would be like, I'm never good at whatever it may be, or I'm not worthwhile. And the survey technique would be to say, okay, well, let's see if anyone else has had that thought themselves. So you go in and just say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And sometimes it'll easier if you say, like, oh, I'm a psychologist and, we're doing a study and I'm wondering if you have 2 minutes to answer a question. And then the person will say, sure. And you say, well, I've been really shy all my life, and it's hard for me to speak up, and I feel like really not worthwhile. And then you stop and you say, well, have you ever felt that yourself? And then the other person may or may not say it, depending. And then they get that immediate feedback of someone they don't know that's not pre-rehearsed, and that could really change things for them.
I love that example. I was doing a workshop in Canada, one of my intensives, and I take people on hikes every evening after the intensive before dinner. And then this woman confessed on the hike, one of the therapists who was attending my workshop, that she had, I think, social anxiety, and that she was very shy and awkward in social situations, and she'd been hiding it because she was ashamed of it. Mm-hmm. And wondered if, I could do something in the hike that would be helpful to her. So I spotted a woman with two teenage looked like daughters with her, and I said, well, let's go up and talk to them. And so that my colleague who was in the workshop, the woman who was shy, she was pretty petrified, and I said, my colleague here has something she wants to tell you and something she wants to ask you. And I said, go ahead and tell them, about this. And she said, oh, do I have to? And I said, yes, you do. And so she blurted this out, and then I told her, now ask them what they think about you, having disclosed that your vulnerabilities and disclosed that you're not always confident and in control, and ask them what they would think about a teacher like you. And so she was terrified to ask this, but I said, you have to do this now. And so she did it. And then one of the girls looks like she was maybe, 12 years old or 9 years old or 13, something like that. She had tears in her eyes, and she looked up at this woman and says, boy, you're the kind of teacher I always wished I'd had. I wish I could have a teacher like you. You're so human. And it just blew the mind of this woman. It was really a life-changing experience to see that what she was hiding as this shameful flaw was actually a bridge to making an instant connection with someone who might well have been a student in one of her classes. And it's shocking information in a really good way. And those are some of the kinds of things that you can do therapeutically if you think outside of the box.
That brings up a question I wanted to follow up on. You're talking a lot about the benefits of doing work outside of the box, doing therapy outside of the box. And I remember when I was in graduate school, professional boundaries were really emphasized. And in several of my jobs, maintaining a professional boundary and keeping yourself a little hidden and like never touching clients or, absolutely never hugging someone. And it sounds like, I'm not, some people might think of these nature therapy hikes as a violation of a professional boundary. And I don't know, maybe that's off base, but I was wondering what you thought about that, Phillip.
That's an excellent question, because I thought about it too. And I've never had anyone with an issue we had as far as confidentiality or anything like that, that it's like we'll be walking down and my dog will be there. And sometimes they'll throw the stick for the dog, and there can be some this is the whole point, is there can be some impromptu moments that you weren't expecting. And then you can use the methods, the very powerful methods that David's been talking about, right there in the spur of the moment, that you can't do in an office. So I have not had anyone who is, very personal and really needs to have that protection. We just do Zoom, or, in the future we'd be in the office. So that's the nice part, is like, this isn't forced on someone. And it's the type of people that are willing to do that and take a risk. And so I had once where, because after evaluation of therapy session, it said, "What'd you dislike?" Well, this one lady came by and we're at the picnic table. This is a teenager, mind you, that had some pretty intense anxiety and depression. She was asking questions and kind of stood around a little bit too long, and it was smiling. I was like hoping that she would leave quicker, and she didn't. And then eventually she did. And it was only 5 minutes. But I would say that is the only time out of, say, hundreds and hundreds of interactions, including, people, like I said before, with people with schizophrenia up on there, that we would see people too. And they felt normal. So in that part of it, and people feel normal in nature, that they have a lot more flexibility of the mind and ability to handle adversity, in my opinion. And that's what I'm getting, because I haven't had one complaint, and he didn't really complain. He said he would have preferred, and he's learning the should statement, not to do it. I would have preferred that she not stay around as long and talk to us. But during COVID, people are dying to talk. So it's but that was the only time that I've had any type of feedback. And that feedback still was within the realms of my patient being very comfortable.
Right. And you're responsible. But I think, Rhonda, you raise a really important point, because there is abuse in all types of therapy conducted in the office or outside of the office. And I think there's a shockingly high percentage of mental health professionals who think it's okay to have sex with a patient, for example, which is an egregious ethics violation. It's a severe malpractice thing. And I don't know what the percentage is, but I think it's like significant. And so I think, because things could be more easily misinterpreted in a hiking situation, that it might be important to be clear to the patient that this is a professional therapy session, and it'll have a lot more beauty and peacefulness than sitting in an office. But this will be different from a friendship or an unprofessional relationship. It's some way to convey that to the person, just so the expectations are clear. Rhonda, you might have a better example how to do that, or what to say.
Well, I know, I just, whatever the language is, but to make it clear, like if you have paperwork with your contract or an intake form, just to use that kind of language that, this isn't a friendship, even though we're barking inside of nature, it's a professional relationship, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I do have language like that, but I would, I could email it to you.
But I think those are always important issues in therapy. There's an art to therapy. There's an ethics to therapy. There's technical skills. There's a lot that goes into a good therapeutic relationship, and you have to be thinking on multiple levels, sometimes at the same times. But I think in our Sunday hikes, I don't think we ever ran into any problems. The one difference, the Sunday hikes are not therapy per se. This is just personal work that the clients are doing as a part of their training as a therapist. But this is California, and they often did want to give a hug at the beginning of the hike and a hug when you said goodbye. And I think that's okay. But if I was also told that if you were to hug an actual patient in a therapy session, that's malpractice, and if you're sued, if there's a liability, an ethics case against you, your insurance company will not defend you and will not pay the damages. That if you do that, you're dead, type of thing. In fact, we were told we could only, the most touching we could do of a patient would be to shake hands once when you first meet the patient, and shake hands again at the last session when you say goodbye. And beyond that, and I know that sounds awfully rigid, and I'm not one to know official correct answers to these kinds of questions, but I think they are very, very important. For sure.
I would say so. I mean, one of my patients had their therapist had slept with them before they got to me. And so it's out there. It's quite serious. And yes, COVID does, of course, help because there's no hugging, period. I mean, absolutely not 100%. But even before COVID, when I was taking those hikes, and people would get very close to me because they felt connected. And we would do a high five. Or a fist bump or something like that, but we don't do hugs. And that's all in the paperwork too. There's a certain patient that I have to assess ahead of time. That's the 15-minute phone consult and paperwork and all of that I have to look at, of like, what type of person is this? Can they, are they, what's going to happen? Because like you said, with California and just the United States in general, you have to be careful of these boundaries. So picking the right client and or patient to do this is very important too. That assessment of many different facets is important. And if there is any type of push in one sense, then I just do that, the talk of like, no, this is not there. And it's a clear boundary. And it happens a lot. When I first trained with, I think it was Angela, and she was explaining how, she would get hit on and things like that, and how she would handle it. And so it's no different. You use the TEAM, use the 5 secrets, but you're also putting in some boundaries there and saying, well, wait a second, is this happening in other relationships? And is this something you want to work on because it's showing up here now? So that could be in an office, or that could be in nature. That's just part of the human condition.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And I would also say that doing therapy while hiking is no guarantee of therapeutic success. I can think of 2 times in particular. Once I was working with this fellow just for free, just because I felt so sad for him, because he'd had his he was going with a woman and he was trying to help her son, and then there was an accident, and the boy was killed. Oh, and he had been blaming himself for 10 years for this death, even though it really wasn't his fault at all. And so I just gave him some free therapy sessions because it was just so rewarding. But once I did a hike with him, and he said actually that he preferred the sessions when we weren't hiking. But when I think back on the session that he didn't like when we were hiking, I actually made a bad therapeutic error of trying to help him. Thinking I knew, what he should be doing, and he got real pissed off. Excuse the language. And also I had a Sunday hike with a wonderful young woman, and I made the same mistake again. I didn't follow the TEAM framework. I just narcissistically thought I knew what she needed, I knew what she should do, and she just got incredibly lividly angry with me during the hike. But in all those cases, it was my therapeutic errors, not the fact that we were hiking or not hiking, that screwed things up. And fortunately, with both of those people, had great outcomes. I was able to repair those errors that I had made, and those, Grand Canyons that's temporarily developed in our relationships, and reconnect and do some great work after that. But it's a lot of it is the skill or lack of skill of the therapist, and a great therapist can be effective, with someone you just met in the grocery store. And be helpful in your interaction with that person. The Buddha was just wandering around in the world trying to bring healing to people. And someone without therapeutic skill can have a PhD or an MD or both and still be very stiff and lacking in warmth, lacking in skill, and how to transform people's lives.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm a big skier, and I was in Utah this last week, and it was a little camp called The Art of Fear, which is pretty cool. It's written a book by a woman named Kristen Ulmer. It was one of the top. It was the best female skier in the world for about a decade, and would go off cliffs and do you name it. And I was in this little group, and there's one lady that we were traversing on this hillside that was pretty steep, pretty significant, that if you fell, you probably would have gotten pretty damaged. And she ended up freezing and having like a panic attack. And I turned up and looked to her, and this is obviously is nature. And one lady was talking to her and trying to use logic. And then I waited for her to stop, and you watched her body was shaking. And I asked her, I said, "What is your body saying to you?" And she says, "I'm paralyzed." And I said, "Well, take your right leg and put it up and put your ski up." And she put her right leg up, and I said, "Do the left." And I said, "Are you paralyzed?" And she says, "No." I said, "The mind is lying right now." And I said, "Let's get back into the body and focus on my skis. And do you trust me? Are you okay with me?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "So if you follow my skis all the way down, I think you'll be safe. And then we'll be able to deal with this, not up here in this situation." And she did. She cruised down, and it worked out really well. And that's just a moment in time that can happen, like you said, in the grocery store. And that's one of the things I would love to do is teach skiing and get hired on. There's like Matt May and a few other people like to do those long intensives. I like to have someone for the day, excuse me, skiing, and have a family skiing, and then teach them TEAM-CBT and 5 secrets. And I don't know, these are all outside of the box things that I'm thinking I'd like to do. And, who knows?
Well, I think you're giving us a preview of your next podcast with us. So when you're ready and have all these cool new things, we'll take it from here. Thank you so much, Phillip. I know Rhonda had incredibly high expectations for this, and has been pushing for this topic, and you certainly hit it out of the park.
Yes, you've met all my expectations, Phillip. Thanks. Wow,
that's impressive.
We're just saying that, Phillip.
I know.
I have a low bar.
That's what I was going to say. I got a feeling you guys had no expectations, and that's why it went just nice and like a beautiful walk down a nice path out here in Northern California.
Yeah.
Well, it was like being on a hike with you. I feel it was really a delightful experience. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yes,
it's a pleasure. Looking forward to our hikes in the future, David.
Yeah, me too.
And I want to let our listeners know, thank you, Phillip, again. I want to let our listeners know that next week we're going to be having a podcast on training about some techniques. We haven't picked out all the techniques, but we want to start doing some more training on specific team techniques. I'm going to let you know in advance that that's what we're going to do next week.
And I want to give a plug for my book, Feeling Great. You can get it on Amazon. It's on hardbound, audio, and electronic you get any of those 3 versions. And also, Jill Levitt and I just had our workshop on self-defeating beliefs, which went great, I might add, although it hasn't happened yet. I'm just predicting that because we recorded this way ahead of time, but it always goes great. And then I think our next workshop, I don't know the date of it yet, but we'll let you know. It's going to be the live therapy workshop.
Nice.
And we're actually going to treat 2 people live in the workshop and then give people exercises, what we did and how we did it, what worked, what didn't work. It'll be a totally new and experiential kind of workshop. I'm excited about it because the live therapy demos that I've done by myself or with Jill have always been mind-blowing experiences. And so this might be a real special opportunity for people. So keep your eyes open for that.
Great. Thank you. Until next time.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
Rhonda.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Philip.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.